Howdy, KALASK. Greetings.
Greetings. The Rhine person, correct. So, we're aware that there's an interest in the current collective present for certain inquiries in certain directions. Let's start first and foremost with the idea that the collectivity with the vessel is currently particularly appropriately fine-tuned to your very special day, so to speak, since your last day and your current day of your festivities, or term you're referring to those these days, the various cultures on your planet, right? Of course, there's the consciousness that's being sent out from people to the idea that openness towards certain entities beyond your physical, correct, is particularly enhanced. Therefore, your collective consciousness that is of such a belief or a conviction to some degree, subconsciously or consciously, makes it a lot easier for such a direction to happen. For example, compared to a day that's perhaps mundane, or a day that's centered around perhaps more airy-fairy events, or more the idea perhaps that the event that's just centered something very physically, where you're more dealing with your material work, so to speak. Those we are material, if you get what we are saying. Now, before you venture on in this particular direction, a general idea. Now, your so-called special day, in terms of this being a day on a particular time, right, is what it is because of the decision of your own peoples or those that ordered you at the structure to keep this day, that you're formulating your own calendar, the concept of this being a recurrent theme, which then sends out a frequency, the energy of making it so. Now, as mentioned previously in your own called time, for us, it's an adjustment of frequency, not something that passes linearly. So, timelines don't exist, at least not in that manner. Just like coloration does not exist. It's a reflection back on your own eyes for what you're sending out. Therefore, you perceive certain elements to have coloration, when in reality it's just your perception making it appear as coloration. Your scientists agree on this. Yes? However, it's not just coloration is everything. Everything more or less just the way you perceive it only exists in your perception, including time, including timelines. There are no timelines. Every single what you consider a second, every single moment, every fracture of existence is an entirely different one. And they don't exist necessarily one after the other. They all exist simultaneously. And now the probability to have certain moments in what you call a timeline align with the other to form such an event, such an experience of being on such a timeline, is simply an assumption, right? Just like you assume, well, I'm expecting mail today, so there's probably going to somebody ring my door and deliver a package. That's the expectancy. You have more likely this going to happen. The same way you can be on a timeline, but, well, this country just declared war with another country, so likely we're going to have a fight happening on this borderline between those two countries, right? That's something to be very physically expected on a timeline. The same way certain beings can read timelines, certain prophets, etc., can read by simply an expectancy. The same way the weather can be forecasted, not because somebody literally knows what will happen, because nothing will happen at all, because it's already happening. But what is most likely in alignment with what you're currently sending out. You have something like brainstorming, right? The idea where you're drawing the idea of a certain thought on a certain board, and then certain other concepts or ideas you connect to it, right? Closing items, for example, if there's a term, then there would be a pants, a shirt, etc., right? Thoughts, those things are the first that come up, the idea of being connected to the general main topic of closing items or a brainstorming idea. The same way of your now moment. Like other all now moments, they are now. Now, around this, there are many other infinite options of what the next now moment will be in your perception of what you consider an experience of time. Any of them is possible, literally any. You're currently on Earth, eating breakfast or dinner, whatever, and the next second you're on your planet Uranus freezing your ass off. Unlikely, but possible. Now for your conscious mind not to completely lose it, right, so you can just the physical, then the next most likely moment that you will associate the brainstorming idea realistically will be obviously finishing breakfast and putting your plate away. So therefore, this is much more likely to happen. But theoretically, it's just as likely to end up on Uranus freezing a reservoir of nowhere. But of course, just in theory, as in physicality, your mind wouldn't cope with that. Besides, if someone would happen that to them, they'd likely die in Uranus and never hear of them again, so that's why this never happened. No one ever told you so because they haven't died on Uranus. But more seriously, your next moments don't exist in terms of time, because again, time isn't real, therefore timelines cannot possibly be real. It's just an association in your brain. Just like we started this interaction a few moments ago in your own understanding of time, but in reality, you could say we've been traveling, so to speak, through a vessel for several years now. Constantly. It's just that you perceive there to be time between our interactions that you consider sessions or events or because that way you need to perceive something in a time of frame. But for us, it's one ongoing experience. You just hop in and out of our experience, and therefore, we're all part of this what you consider a timeline. We're beyond time. And again, we're rare, individuals in your species still don't completely understand this concept. You will once you get beyond time. You can't see the forest for all the trees simply. Or believe you have an Asian side of a particular planet, the idea that you can't see the river as long as you're still swimming in the river. You have to swim out of the river first and look at it flowing by and you realize you weren't just in water, you were in one particular river. Now, the same goes for timeline. Once you hop timelines, you shift timelines, which is bullshit. It never happens, right? Not that you're in the stream of bovine feces, more an idea, a concept, it's simply not accurate. Timelines aren't existing. So therefore you can't shift from one timeline to a next timeline. It's impossible. However, what you can have is the experience of being in another timeline, because simply you have another brainstorming idea. Suddenly, instead of thinking of socks and shirts first, you suddenly think of a jacket. Or you think of a clothing item first, so therefore now you're under association brainstorming idea, therefore you have another experience of what you consider timelines. You are on another timeline, but actuality, you simply have another association. Therefore, a version of other people, or other people entirely, or perhaps you have a mood swing, right? Now you're a female in your species, when you're a certain period, quite literally, right? You might experience much to a greater degree, or of course, but anybody in your species can easily induce when you're digesting certain plant matter that highly increases your affectionality, right? Your entire species is constantly suffering from mood swings as far as we are perceiving such, so perhaps it's not something you consider that abnormal, and for us it certainly is. When you suddenly see the world through completely different eyes, nothing changed, but you see it differently. So therefore you suddenly live in a different world. That's perhaps the most akin that we can use in terms of a point of reference that everybody literally can understand, so it's an abstract concept of what a timeline shift would be, right? And you can't really understand the theoretical concept of timelines unless you're talking about shifts. If you'd only consider one timeline, one perception of time to call it timeline, you can't really understand what they are, because again, it's the concept of being in the forest and not seeing the forest for all the trees. Now, when you apparently have shifted a timeline, all you've done is have a different perception, just like you're perhaps saying, well, you have to sleep a night over it, then you'll see it differently, right? This particular saying from your word. Now, when you're doing such, of course, the world doesn't change, but your perception of it changes, therefore what the word means to you, therefore also the word and the way you live in it has indeed changed, because you are on a new timeline. Obviously, again, every single moment is new, so therefore there are no timelines, but that's the way you can perceive it more consciously without going in a psychological frenzy trying to grasp the concepts beyond your current perception. Now, is there any particular, well, any particular inquiry on this particular topic before we hop on another one?
Yeah, KALASK, me and Richard were both wondering about, like, shifting to different timelines. And I mean, I know you said, like, we don't really shift, but, like, say, for example, I wanted to experience like I wanted to go to Atlantis or I wanted to go see the Tower of Babel. Is there anything I could consciously do to like to go to that timeline or whatever you would call it?
First and foremost, you need to believe and be convinced of belief that it's possible, right? But you currently don't. Now, it's much more likely to perceive it, but then again, you're talking about Atlantis or Babylon as if there is only one version of it in one particular moment. But there are infinite moments of those two particular cultures in what you consider your past, which isn't real. So it depends which version would you like to get into. The fact that you even have this version in your mind, you represent of certain buildings or certain insular structure, right? That's already you're tuning into this particular timeline compared to if you would physically travel down there or to the Bermuda Triangle perhaps and observe a source and observe what's currently going on there. Currently, again, just your perception. And the very fact that you have to determine your mind, certain ideas, is you're tuning into this particular timeline as much as you possibly currently can. At some point, you can get so overwhelmed by it that you feel like perhaps you consider in your dream state currently when you're mostly going beyond time for what you currently are able to because you're shift dimensionalities then, you will almost sense as if you were there. And the more you're convinced that you are really there, the more you will be, because that's all it is. You're currently also experiencing your current lifespan in your current locality because you're convinced that it is real. But in the end, it is just as real as your dream.
Okay, so you're saying if I wanted to visit Atlantis, I just need to convince myself that I'm in Atlantis?
You are literally in Atlantis just like you are where you currently are right now. And you can't convince yourself, you have to be convinced first. You can't convince yourself, you have to be convinced on your own already. We're just correcting your wording here, but essentially you're correct.
Okay, but like, is there any like I know with the like the Bermuda Triangle, it can like shift you to another timeline or whatever it's called. So like, is there a way to like for somebody to build some kind of machine to shift somebody to another timeline without them having to be convinced or whatever that they're just shifting?
Well, the machine would then just create what you are otherwise doing anyway. So yes, it's very possible that the person constructing the machine using the machine would still have to get in that state, right? There's no workaround, no simple trick. But yes, indeed, there is a certain opening in your Bermuda Triangle where you can shift to a perhaps parallel or higher dimensionality, and from a higher dimensionality, you can choose different timelines once you are there. So yes, if you would travel to the Bermuda Triangle and find the right spot, so to speak, that could happen. But you would like not appear in a different timeline, you would appear beyond time and can choose a timeline, but since you're unable to fully comprehend what that entails, you would likely end up somewhere else. Like your Philadelphia project, right?
Right. Now, do you like? Are you familiar with the Back to the Future movies? Like, has David ever seen those?
At least one. Where are some concepts from the idea of cars flying, etc. Yes, it's like what you're referring to.
Okay, yeah. Well, like basically, like in the first movie, like the main character, he goes back in time and like he basically screws his well, like he prevents his parents from meeting each other. So that kind of like in the year that he's normally from, it prevents him from being born. So it's kind of like the movie starts in 1985. He goes back to 1955, and in 1955 he starts to like disappear because it's like he screwed up his own existence. Like would something like that happen in reality? Like if I were to go back to if I were to go like 30 years back in time and prevent my parents from ever meeting each other, like would I cease to exist, or would it just be like I don't know? Would there be different timelines? I don't know. I'll let you explain it.
Again, there are no timelines. And there are infinite versions of your parents, an infinite version of what they experience. So you simply can alter your perception of what your current past is. There are versions of your parents that never met and a version that was never born. So you cannot possibly not exist in version you are born. you can just identify with a different version. It doesn't exist, but by the timeline that you would choose to be an experience began, you would choose, because timelines aren't real, you just create, you choose to identify with a certain timeline where you don't currently are incarnated, which of course would result then in you being disincarnated. But still you would be incarnated, just a different version of who you currently are.
Okay. Well, that answers my questions. Does anybody else have any questions on this topic? If so, speak up now. If not, KALASK, did you say like you have another topic you want to discuss before we go to our queue?
Indeed, yes.
Hey, can I just test out my mic? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah,
we can pick up from your communication, Richard. Yes. Now, as nobody has a question for the topic,
I have.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the American man, Andrew Basiago. He said he traveled back to the US government had a program, a time travel program, where they would send kids, gifted kids, back into the 1980s. I mean, into the 1890s and 80s, into the basically the 17th century and stuff, and I mean to the 19th century, and they would be able to bring them back, and they had certain jump rooms in all over the US. Like there was a jump room that would go to Mars. There was another jump room that would go, years back. Just if you have any, and this guy is called Andrew Basiago, and he was part of this gifted children's program, secret government program. Do you know anything about that?
Well, we're aware. Your government certainly has such projects where you're sending people back and forth. In particular, what you consider experiments. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that this person arrived in what you consider this particular time frame, but a version that he was able to perceive from his current perception, that's vantage point, and resembled of what he perceived as his particular time frame that he considers the reality of where he is from. Again, this was of course just a version of what he's going to participate in now. This relates back to the Ryan's question earlier, considering its possible machinery in subject matter. Whereby there are similar experiments dating back to this very time of the 19th century and early 20th, particularly with different cultures, including the Western region and the Russian Empire at the time, considering the Soviet regime. Different of those concepts are being administered, but again, that's the timeline from which we are speaking currently. Which means the perception, what people are currently connected to this conversation are able to perceive. This is again just one version. There are other versions where time travel has already happened in ancient Rome, for example, right? It doesn't mean that someone traveled back to ancient Rome and changed the history then, because if that happens, it just means that the version where such a time travel can occur. So yes, such events like the Basiago person describes are indeed possible, and such experiments are indeed going on. Doesn't necessarily mean that they experience what they think they're experiencing, but they certainly experience something you would consider paranormal. Which of course not paranormal, it's just the way you describe it usually, in your perception, because what you have defined as normal is very limiting. Now,
Could you just say something about the time travel in Rome and what that's about?
repeat.
Time travel in Rome, in ancient Rome.
We were just sharing the possibility of time travel happening in ancient Rome, for example. It could have also happened in ancient Egypt or Atlantis. Or the point being that since they're infinite version of all what you consider a possibility of your history, it means there's also different events happening at any point in what you're considering, for example, the perception of Rome or Atlantis or any culture in your perceived past that was a different level. So, for example, also the version that Atlantis never sank, obviously also the version you consider perhaps your current timeline you're on. But then again, your timeline consists of moments you imagine to be real. Ultimately, the idea of timelines results in the concept that existence is not real. Or rather, existence is the same thing as non-existence. Everything is nothing. Again, your English language fails, or any other language that you're aware of and comprehending acoustically, fails to properly describe those concepts, which is why you likely understand them easily once you go beyond your current dimensionality. Until then, all we can give you is brain fodder to confuse you further, but if that's what you're sharing, here are some more. Now, I'll finish a particular timeline topic for this particular time.
I guess not. Yeah, Kalask, you can go on to the other topic you wanted to talk about.
Well, the other topic we're initially wishing to refer to is the idea of what you consider to be a figure date in your calendar. Again, what you've now come to term Halloween in terms of what you perceive as such due to the projection of people since centuries in various cultures and a few decades, particularly in your modern Western culture, of a particular energy that's being created from peoples, just like your New Year's Eve, for example, that you create when you're considering, well, it's a new year now. New year, new me, this bullshit, right? Now, the concept, of course, being you created the concept of a new year, and therefore you also give you suggestions what likely happening during your current year from your own projection. So we're not giving you a suggestion of what will definitely happen in your current timeline future. We're just giving you a suggestion of what will happen or does happen in 2019 based on the perception your collective consciousness is sending out, what perception you only have of your current identity that's connected to the time frame that you have called a year and we call it a particular frequency. Same goes for certain dates in the calendar. For example, you have come up with this concept that the line is thinner between the words, therefore the connectivity to vessels particular appropriate, perhaps not so much when you tread on side topics such as timelines, but currently when we're on this topic much more smoothly. Now, the idea simply being that there was a battle in the timeline that we currently would perceive to be the most appropriate to your current existence. So the moments that would be considered your history from your own current identity perception as a species. Now, particularly, of course, the Northwestern European region, where the original idea comes from when certain people arrived on the British peninsulas before the later invaders that are coming from the European made it. Now, there was war between two factions. That was the main reason this particular date is based on. This particular invasion, overpowering. There are two main wars in the colonization, particularly of the Ireland and to a large part also the rest of the British Isles at this particular event. One being the Beltane idea, or some high idea and some of their own local terms for it, and now your modern term of Halloween. Of course, they are more esoteric, modern interpretation. It was modern, we mean your so-called last 1,000 years. Originally, their idea was simply a very physical commemoration of victory of one faction over the other. Now, there was also certain sacrifices that had later on, also involving rumors what you consider perhaps extraterrestrial species of an animalistic nature, some of them our kind, some of them also others, that you would perhaps consider animal gods at the time, whatever, anthropomorphic, whatever, right? So humanoids in the sense that you consider us humanoid, the idea of body, arms, torso, 5-star pattern, or with heads that strongly resemble something that you might consider perhaps more animal-like, but if you are more demonic or devil depictions, hail from those also in this particular region. Now, originally, it was a much more humanoid race that invaded this particular peninsula, from which still the people hail that have a certain genetic lineage, and to some degree is also still present in the vessel, but perhaps more so on the British Isles. Now, since we're aware as one current person present in the idea of inhabiting this particular country or not of this particular bloodline, just to make this clearer. The bloodline you perhaps consider mostly Celtic, typically the idea of certain frames, not necessarily Creed, since this is more a result of intermixing between those invaders and those that were originally present there on this isle already before the invasion occurred. And yes, with this invasion, we consider this happening via spaceship travel, or as the ancient would call them, probably clouds or flying vehicles, etc. Most of those obviously being a reference to the idea of them being something of an advent. Now, of course, rather the Reddish, well, we are not particularly familiar with your genetic lineages, and also the vessel is not the correct information for us to give you an exact description of haplogroups, etc., of what exactly funneled there into your gene pool, or in terms of what your looks are concerned, your phenotypes, but you're a type that's usually perceived as having red hair and originally bluish eyes before the particular mixture resulted perhaps more in a darkening of the again, we don't find the correct haplogroups to describe this properly, but a typical look to consider Celtic or typically Irish today hails from this particular advent, which is still then battling between this particular invading groups and some other groups. Also, some had involvement with certain, you consider perhaps non-human or extraterrestrial species over this particular region, and the original inhabitants, well, originally those that likely came from the European continent earlier, which were subsequently enslaved or subjugated, but much to their benefit from what we perceived afterwards, since many of their culture was derived from there, obviously long before Romans brought around the Tory ideas there, or even before Anglo-Saxons conquered large parts of this region. Those were groups that brought them their original culture, and of course genetic identity to a large degree due to the interbreeding with the natives on this particular subpeninsula, that's the best term. And the commemoration of wars, since there are many cultural ideas, well, our ancestors won the war 100 years ago, it's what we are celebrating. This is not so much a spiritual event either, it was simply such an event, except it was thousands of years ago, and therefore many different mythological interpretations, finally esoteric ideas, and finally religious, all the way down to your more Abrahamic faiths that very often put their own interpretation of all the facilities. But again, this happened long before those misinterpretations of Abrahamic faiths. It happened also as a misinterpretation of different, what you consider pagan faiths today, but different overlays of different cultures, of some that was originally simply the commemoration of a battle, or rather a whole war, and one very decisive battle that happened on this particular day. Another one again on another festivity you consider Beltane or Beltane or whatever in this particular local culture. Everything else is history. However, what we want to enunciate here clearly is also the idea when you project out certain concepts as your ancestors have done for at least a few hundred years, and the idea of, well, it being as an esoteric meaning, there's the sinning of the whale, etc., that then really creates that idea of being something like a sinning of a whale. We are aware since a few decades this idea spread more further to your Western Hemisphere, much more with the idea of much more the dismay of personal religious institutions that are currently established, and of course also more commercialized, etc., and not so much centered around the actual idea of there really being something like a word beyond the veil. But since you send out this perception, that then opens beings such as the vessel for a clearer channel, because it grounds those ideas more properly, which again refers back to the concept, if you want to experience something, you first need to convinced, I believe convinced, that it's even possible. Whether it's traveling back to Atlantis, or it is communicating with entities such as us beyond the physical. Again, we are not really not physical, we have an identity that's defined by physical form, but you get our another dimensionality, so therefore, in my perception for your species, we are beyond the whale. Now, is there a particular question on this topic before we move to another one yet?
Hi, class. This is Zach. I just had a quick question about Halloween. Can you hear me okay?
Great, Zach. You pick up from your speaking appropriately, yes.
Okay, great. I've heard through other channels that Halloween is also associated with the day before the destruction of Atlantis. Can you speak on that at all?
From we're aware of, this happened earlier. It's likely that later what you saw on pagan cultures, there was an overlay of those events, right? Just as we just shared some Abrahamic faiths overlay their own events over others. For example, the birth of your so-called Jesus person was artificially construed to be around the time of the winter solstice, when in reality it was another particular time, no matter what Jesus you're referring to. Or this obviously also happened in older cultures, since what you consider pagan today is very often a pro term for many different cultures that followed one after the other. Now, since the attack of Atlantis was likely important to this particular culture, it was simply also related to the idea of what happened on the British Isles, particularly Ireland. But then again, Ireland is largely connected to Atlantis, since Atlantis, to some degree, stretched all the way up there, and therefore, likely, those peoples also still had something of a remnant or a memory of this particular event. So it's very possible that there are certain peninsulas that are now sunk, that are part of the larger Atlantean Empire, but again, even those isles were, if you stretch out the Iberian Empire further, just like the Hawaii is part of the United States, for example, right? Or Australia was part of the British Empire for a long time, for example, still part of the Commonwealth, right? Same way, originally, they were part of the larger Atlantean Empire in terms of like being a colony. Now, it is very possible that certain parts of the Atlantean Empire were sunk artificially in this particular war. Because again, a battle took place at this particular point in time when there was the final, well, colonization that happened. However, there was already a battle before that, a decisive battle, likely what you currently perceive as 1 year, again, for what you referred to earlier in timelines is just one interpretation. Now, the other one being the entire year when the conquest happened. Now, there was a final battle that finally cemented the rulership over this particular region, and that's why it was being celebrated. And again, it's very likely possible that in this war, an entire island was destroyed. For what we're aware of, it's not referring to what you usually refer to in your Danish cultures as the Great Flood, or there might have still be remnant that was destroyed in the aftermath of the flood.
Okay.
But again,
cool.
the reason it was being celebrated is not because the Atlantic continent in the water, obviously. Not particularly something to be celebrated with this culture, since it was not necessarily hostile to Atlantis, or the idea that this particular species or race, or whatever you want to call it, had victory over natives in this region. And yes, a large group of people were killed off in the process, and some of them might have been located on another peninsula, which then sank.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, KALASK.
Very well. Third topic, or any more inquiries on this particular one?
I guess you can go into the other topic, KALASK.
Yes. Now, next topic right here, what has been previously, again, timelines, been referred to the idea of integration, right? Well, first you first put some water in the vessel. Yes, now, the idea, your perception of integration is perhaps not what we originally suggested. Now, many individuals in your species have apparently misconstrued the topic, the idea, well, the reptilians or other celestial species are all going to come together, join hands, dance around the male pole, to refer back to a Maltine idea, and everybody is going to get along perfectly well, everything is going to be integrated. And that's when the universe is finished. This is grossly incorrect. Now, we are just one species. We are obviously a very important species, but nonetheless, we're just one species. If it wasn't for us, somebody else would have to fulfill this role. This also refers to the idea of the RSR's misconception of once we conquer this planet, it's going to be free of the evil and the darkness. But in reality, if you succeed, some other planet will have to be, ultimately, in order to keep the balance. Now, this doesn't just refer to species, but to entities. There are obviously reptiles. There are very rarely allied more with lighter fringes, but not every reptile or other being is converting to light on any what you consider a timeline. And then subsequently, there being to be internal peace because all the species have adapted to the same concept and idea, etc., of what some perceive as light. That's not what happens. Otherwise, the whole experiment would be pointless. Because this is all still the physical. In order to transcend those ideas, you need to get to places where again your language fails to describe those concepts. If we would all be like you, there would be no reason for either of us to exist at all. It does not mean, however, that we would merge into one species and therefore resolve a conflict, because the whole idea of conflict being resolved is already light. Conflict, war, strife, battle is dark. It exists simultaneously, it has to exist simultaneously, ultimately. There is no such thing as eternal war, but also no such thing as eternal peace. That's impossible because everything is the exact opposite of itself. At least in your dimensionality, but ultimately. So, the concept we've been sharing, and will be shared again, is that you need to integrate this integration itself. We used the term before, we will use it again perhaps more often until people have it really drilled in their heads. So our concept is not to create peace by unification of different opponents, but to create integration and transcending beyond our current universe by integrating what is disintegrative, by integrating polar opposites, not different species or species that hold polar opposite ideas, and coming to a common understanding, because a common understanding is already polarized. A common misunderstanding, then is the other polarity. So, the only way to experience peace is to make peace with war. War is part of existence just as peace, or put differently, change is the only constant. You consider peace constant and change war, for example, right? Therefore, you cannot possibly be comfortable and at ease with anything being status quo unless you accept that the only reality of status quo is the constant change. You cannot possibly be at peace before you haven't made peace with the fact that there is war. As long as you are still fighting for peace, you are at war. As long as you are still struggling to finally achieve world peace, you're dissatisfied with the current state, you're sending out the energy of conflict. On the other hand, if you're, well, there are people killing each other, that's part of life, there's war, that's what happens, that's part of existence, just like everything else, then you will suddenly be in a much more peaceful state internally. Also, the whole idea and concept of people in your species, there are what you consider spiritual, which is not at all what we consider such. But beings that think, well, we shouldn't demonstrate for peace, that's not working, we need to meditate for peace. When you're doing this, you're still sending out the energy of being dissatisfied with a certain status quo. Right? Which again is the energy of conflict. You're just being passive aggressive. Meditation can be a form of passive aggressiveness. You're using it in such a manner. Nothing wrong with that. You can meditate and concentrate on killing a certain person. Perfectly acceptable. Wish you great success. That is one of us, of course. However, you are then engaging in spiritual warfare. Also a great term from your language that might you understand that spirituality has nothing to do with peace or with pacifism. It's simply anything that goes beyond what your current perception, your culture deems possible. Esoterics, etc. Now, when you're therefore in this whole concept of the autonomy of peace and war, and we're just using peace and war as stressing example of light and dark, because many in your world have now come to terms with, well, we're no longer light or dark, they're more advanced, they're balanced now. But I just use the term balance from what we perceive through Russell, and still identify with the light, they're just calling it balanced now. which is obviously what we're referring to, but then again, your English language fails to describe those concepts, so therefore you feel you need to come to different terms, same as a timeline concept, to express the same idea with different words, to get you out of the funk of identifying with a certain word and still filling it with the same energy instead of moving away from it energetically. Therefore, also we bring up the concept of peace and war, for example, because it's easier for something that stirs up emotion in you in the idea of being extreme of light and dark, right? Therefore, as long as you still want one of those sides to succeed, even by integrating both different sides and having a common understanding, you still identify with a lighter side because you want to have a common understanding compared to a common misunderstanding. For example, you also have sporting events where different sport teams go at each other, or even boxing events where people punch each other's faces in. It's also part of their culture, right? And you can of course say, well, it doesn't really matter about those people who of those is winning. It's perfectly fine, they should all come together and be peaceful with each other. But then again, you're still taking the point of, well, we shouldn't fight, those events should be illegal. Obviously, you are then engaged with the whole concept, in conflict with the whole concept of there being such events in the first place. On the other hand, if you're sitting in the audience, yes, great, those people are fighting, punch you in the face. Now, this idea, of course, being more conflicting if you want one side to win rather than the other. But everywhere in the room is still agreeing that the fight going on is great. They're just disagreeing who should win. But they're more or less in harmony with the idea they want such fights to take place. Now, obviously there are more politicized events and there are near of political battles, etc., where people apparently have different opinions totally in what they want for their region, but they still agree on the form of exchange that's happening. On the other hand, others might revert to political terrorism. They use a different method. Also for different reasons, with different goals, but nonetheless, they're all the same frequency of committing political terrorism for whatever reason. And they're still on the same frequency, and all of those frequencies exist simultaneously, and therefore, if you're accepting of all of those, then you're at peace. If you disagree with any of those because you want to create peace, then you're at war. Again, every word in your language is a contradiction and oxymoron. Just to stress this once again, we felt it was very important to bring this back to your collective consciousness, particularly since we're currently addressing only a fraction of your community, spiritually, whatever, the spiritual faggotry community, right? Perhaps a fraction that's less in this particular alignment of what we have termed such, RFR, whatever. And that is perhaps more able to integrate those concepts through misintegration, or rather to readjust their own perception of what your esoteric, spiritual evolution is all about from our perception. Again, if you want to have a more peaceful reference, then remind yourself the saying that change is the only constant. Change, for example, in this case, being darkness, constant being light, or the other way around, it doesn't really matter. You can only move beyond the constant of light and dark once you fully accept and embrace and use both of them. Don't accept darkness as a viable option you're not choosing. You need to choose it in order to integrate it. And that includes integrating disintegration. Again, your language fails grossly. But perhaps there's something one of your current present Harris monkey species wish to inquire on this particular topic while we still some water in the vessel.
If nobody else has questions on this topic, I guess I'll start with my. I guess we'll start with the queue, and I'm not sure if Lisa's ready, so I guess I'll go first, and then Lisa, you can go after me if you're ready. But yeah, KALASK, it's interesting about like the light and the dark. I mean, like I was telling Metax, I'm reading a book called Darth Plagueis about like it deals a lot with like the light side and the dark side of the Force in Star Wars, and I definitely want to ask like both you and Metax about this topic, but like not today necessarily. I have some other questions for today. So yeah, like the main thing I wanted to ask today was like when we were talking about the Luciferian rebellion, you mentioned that one of Anu's sons became known as Allah, and his other son became known as the Jehovah Yahweh person. Can you say which one became known as which?
Well, from where the sin person for this particular religion was likely the origin of the modern version of what your current Muslim population considered Allah, But there was likely also some transitioning points there, what we referred to recently with the idea of your so-called Samhain Halloween myth, right? The whole concept of being overlay over our cultures. So there was also some combination of different aspects of certain gods into the Chala combination, which of course also happened from the biblical interpretation. So some terms of the other gods, your Jehovah person also subscribed to the other person, that then was later called Chala, or being likely first associated with your moon, a skin person, and you're really spelling the idea of sinning, right? Coming from this term. Not literally, but the idea, the spelling of the word, right? This being the deity to which this was later attributed, had the Jehovah person likely being to some degree from the Enlil person. However, there was also some attributes from the Eki person associated with it. Again, you remember having faced like older pagan festivities have been changed, and therefore certain aspect of one individual was combined with aspects to another individual and projected onto them. Same, of course, again with your Jesus person, since there wasn't only one, but later on it becomes one person interpretation. But likely Enlil and Sin were the originators or the same people, which were still being worshipped by those later Abrahamic groups that made up their own religion based on these particular gods, but then attributed certain attributes of other gods to them as well. The same, by the way, happened to our beloved Barbuk.
Who was this Sin person that became known as Allah? Was that the same person as Enlil?
No, that was likely somebody in the lineage of this person. Again, we are just using words from the Sumerian mythology, since in your so-called ancient asteroid field, this is the most popular. But it's not like this was mainly in ancient Sumer. This happened in various cultures. It's like of records from ancient Sumer is likely better preserved because they weren't completely annihilated in other cultures and were destroyed by missionaries. But those people was raiding over different regions of your planet.
So was this Sin person, was he a brother of Enki and Enlil?
He was a follower of a bloodline for later, a generation or two later.
So was he like the son or the grandson of Enki or Enlil?
Or nephew or something similar, yes, coming certainly from the bloodline.
Okay. Were Jehovah and Yahweh different people or the same person?
Well, Yahweh from you were simply a description, right?
Uh-huh.
So Jehovah is simply a reading of the word. Well,
Okay.
your Aramaic language, you might not be aware of, has no vowels, right?
Yeah.
Vocals. So therefore, you can put different vowels in there, which was later constructed by reinterpretations and translations in spoken word, correct?
Uh-huh.
So it's just a literal formulation of the Yahweh term. It could also be called Jehovah or Yahovah or Yehovah or Yehovu, right?
Okay.
So the correct term would be Yahweh.
Okay. And so last question about this Sin person. How do you spell his name? Is it just S-I-N?
Yes.
Okay. All right, on another topic real quick. So like during the 2016 election here in the United States, there was like a British spy who he put together like a dossier in which he claimed that Russia had a lot of dirt on Donald Trump, and one of the things that Russia had on him was that like apparently in 2013, well allegedly in 2013, Donald Trump went to Moscow and like Putin sent some prostitutes to Trump's hotel room, and basically he was secretly videotaped having sex with the prostitutes, and like allegedly like the prostitutes even urinated on him, which like Trump of course denies. But anyway, it's like a big joke here. You know, people make fun of Trump saying, "Oh, there's a PP tape of him." Do you know if Putin and Russia really have a PP tape of Donald Trump?
It's not like we are observing all your private channels of communication of your secret services, etc. It's correct that there are certain connection between those two individuals. However, there's obviously much more dirt on him from a certain other individual that since has been suicided, so to speak, right? On your very own country. So they have much more incriminating what you consider perhaps evidence on this your particular so-called president than anybody in Russia does.
Do you mean Jeffrey Epstein that was suicided?
Well, yes, that was the individual who was suicide. However, there were other individuals also in the presence of this person, which are much more powerful, much more similar position. However, they likely are now in possession of anything incriminating, not just on your so-called president, but also several other of your presidential candidates. Now, of course, such interactions between political arenas happen all the time. Of course, infiltration happens in politics, blackmail happens in politics. Yes, there's obviously meddling in politics of other countries, and yes, China and Russia are new players, obviously, from what you're perceiving. We don't care much about your inner human politics, right? We're only reptilian politics, but especially when it comes to Belarus, not like we are supporting any party or any country, or those are interesting quarrels as far as we are concerned, like an anthill that's having their own quarrels going on for whatever reason we're observing from the outside. So therefore, we have no interest in those minute details, but obviously general concepts can perceive is what the United States and Europe has been doing for the longest time by meddling in other countries' affairs. It's now more to the extent that Russia and China are finally figuring out how to do this as well. Now, we're not referring to any particular event, but this is happening more often than not, but mainly in Africa and to some degree perhaps in Europe. It's just for the first time likely the United States has this happening to themselves as well. Now, of course, it depends what you consider the United States, because it's really a united country. It comprises of many different cultures and peoples with their own interests that are fighting each other, and some are much more powerful than others, and those that are much more powerful likely, of course, have a much more greater say and possibility to manipulate certain events and also get dirt on other people. Obviously, the more richer people in your particular country have the most power by far, and not as you commonly like to refer to your peoples or the people's power, which is obviously nonsense. It's usually your so-called richer people that are in charge, and of course they also instigate against each other. This again obviously also happens occasionally internationally, like in this case. Now again, we're not referring to a particular type in general, but there are at least numerous individuals that have something considering dirt on your so-called president, just like on different presidents of various countries, including the Western region, including other important European powers, including other important Asian powers, etc., and certainly North American powers. What other countries perhaps being so politically unimportant and corrupt that there is not being considered important enough for such blackmailing and bribing, or rather, it does happen there just more locally.
Okay, just now when you were mentioning like the president, the leader of Germany, like, did you mean there's dirt on the leader of Germany, or the leader of Germany has dirt on Donald Trump?
The former, not just the so-called leader of Germany. Again, we want to infringe on the West's own will, since it doesn't like us referring to its current country location with this term for its own reason. We don't care, but in general, perhaps more realistically, the leader of your so-called European Union currently, right? Now, obviously, European Union is not currently being ruled by this particular person. It's being ruled by European Bank, not by the European Senate, or whatever you wish to term it. Just like the United States is not run from Washington, D.C., it's run from the Wall Street. Obviously, it's no secret. It's not much different in other parts of your world, just more open, for example, Russia or China, and its own governmental structure. So the corruption there is more obvious. In the West is, of course, more aware of corruption somewhere else than among its own ranks, or which is to admit rather to it happening somewhere else. But obviously, in a more perhaps communist system, it happens more along party lines, while in a more capitalist system, it happens more along monetary lines. But the content is the same. And blackmail, bribery, etc.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm out of time, so strength and honor, KALASK. And Lisa, are you ready to speak?
straight door to Ryan.
Lisa.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I'm here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later, class.
Greetings, Lisa.
Greetings, KALASK. Greetings. It's good to be here with you.
Indeed.
Yes. And also to hear everything that you've been saying. It's been really great. And I know a lot of us are gonna go over it, but still there's a lot of things that I've been hearing from you that I've been able to understand, and that's great for me. Also, yes, thank you. The light and darkness, something I wrote the other day, which was different than I have thought about before. And it says, the light illuminates in the darkness, not to eradicate its existence, but to see or to look into the darkness, manifesting from darkness. Bringing it into the light is to manifest something into existence, to make form. So we need darkness to create from.
Correct.
And yeah, there's
Need
less
creation and destruction simultaneously.
Yes, and there's so much less judgment on either side when I'm seeing it that way or feeling it that way. And that's something that I feel like you've been saying, so go ahead.
Well, judgment is present, just like there is acceptance, right?
Yes.
Because judgment, again, is dark. So, again, that's where your English language or its limits come into play. Okay. You can judge both sides, and you can accept both sides. But by accepting darkness, obviously, you're accepting judgment. And by judging judgment, right, you're in judgment. So, ironically, again, we are not suggesting you replace your words with other words, but replace concepts with other concepts, or rather integrate different concepts. Ultimately, you don't have to stand between light and dark, exactly the middle point, be neither light nor dark, be gray, because literally the so-called Zeta gray beings, right, have approached this topic. And what they have achieved is completely nullification of energy and non-existence, right? So, we suggest rather to venture off in different areas, both lighter and darker. Obviously, we represent more a darker point, right? Kitty cats, perhaps a lighter point, etc., different species, and ultimately, venturing over, you don't learn the lesson of light and dark by being neither, but by being both. So, trying to nullify them, that's not what integration does. It's being able to hold the frequency of the uttermost extremes at the same and what you call time.
Yes. I am agreeing with that.
Perfect.
Yes. And it's actually, I mean, it's been difficult.
Great.
But
Great.
Yes, and the resistance, I found that it's needed sometimes. Resistance actually helps manifest something too.
Exactly. It also defines, right? If you have one big pudding of nothingness, right, you have no experience.
Yes.
It's like throwing all food in the blender, then all food tastes the same like a blending of everything. How boring. No conflict are happening, no separation, no identity, nothing. No growth can happen in such a matter.
That's correct. And living in the physical, that's what it's about. Being able to feel those things, have those things, and be those things.
Precisely. You can have an existence without struggle.
Yes. Yeah, my perception on struggle is changing, so.
The more you enjoy it, the less you will need it.
Yep. Agreeing. Yes, thank you. There's a lot of more clarifying that's been happening, and I'm very grateful for all of it and being able to see myself and not be afraid. And also be afraid too, because that actually helps. Yes, it helps.
Don't be afraid to be scared of you.
Yes, exactly.
Or be.
It's an oxymoron. It's like so awesome.
Once you reach that point where all words become oxymorons, you will likely be in a state where you can communicate to us directly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
You will also go crazy in the process, but that's just comes to territory.
Yeah, that's funny. That's been a fear, but I mean, why
Great.
not?
Another
Yes.
one. Yes.
Yes. Why not? Yeah. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Thank you, KALASK, for everything.
Much
Strength and
strength and fear to Lisa.
Thank you. Appreciations to you, KALASK.
Likewise.
Strength and honor, KALASK.
Strength nor richer.
Yeah, I wanted to just go quickly through my questions. My first one is about the Tesla coil.
Yes, speak up.
My first one is about the Tesla coil.
Yes.
And what it is and how does it work. You know, I understand it's a free energy device, but what's the science behind it? And yeah, that's what I'm asking. That's my first question.
Yes. Are you considering how this particular device would function?
Yes.
Yes, it's simply transmitting what you consider, for example, electricity without the necessity to use something like a wire. Therefore, it's projecting electrical charge by what you could perhaps consider something like magnetism from one point to another. We don't have the technicalities in the vessel's mind to describe it with the proper physical physicist terms, right? But of course, we have a general concept of what such a rather primitive device would entail. It's not that much different from what you've come up with, the idea of sending energy via wires, which is also makes it easier controllable. Of course, the judgment being it's safer because you can send it from one end to the other more clearly without traveling through the ether, so to speak, and the possibility of being distracted, but in reality, obviously, also financial interest in the idea, because if it was distributed in such a way, it was not as easily be controlled and fractured, again, also referring again to the idea of lighter and darker here, right? Darkness again also being down to definition, separation, etc., right? In this term, it's easier controllable of where you send energy, in this case electricity, from one spot to the other via such a wire system compared to sending it through the ether, more like your radio wave frequencies, right? It's not as easy to control who listens to a radio station that you're sending out. You could distribute electricity in the same manner like your radio station is distributing frequency. For example, or your mobile net, your mobile phone net, right? So the same way you are in a certain region where you can pick up frequency with your mobile phone and get on your internet, your area-wide area network, correct? The same way you could also receive or distribute electricity. So instead of, for example, oh, I am using my phone the whole day to be on the internet where I'm tuned in this particular region that I'm currently in, where I can access the internet because here's wireless internet. Instead, you could also have wireless electricity. Instead of I have to plug my phone in, I just, while I am here in the region, my phone is being originally charged automatically because electricity is being distributed to it. Of course, we want to interfere to a large degree with the bodily function. In the way the Tesla person imagined it, there would likely have to be some more administering of it, but your military has done so quite sufficiently in many regards, just not being used in such a manner in an economic sector for the reason previously mentioned, for it not being as easily distributable and controllable. But that's obviously currently the trend in your world, that power is being shifted away from your so-called Illuminati to the so-called AI. Now, we don't judge this for better or worse, but just describe that's what's happening in your current time frame that you perceive as a line that's currently going on. But again, that's just what we're referring currently from your frequency and where you are headed if you're remaining in this particular frequency that you currently are in.
Okay. I have more questions about that, but I'll just move on to the next one. I wanted to ask about LSD and a certain scientist. First of all, I've done it. It's fantastic. A certain scientist described it as fitting into the brain like a puzzle piece into a puzzle. Albert Hoffman, and said it makes human beings be the way they were supposed to act. It's like we become our full selves with it. I just wanted to describe what is it and what led Albert Hoffman to discover it, because it's such a unique thing, and like it's just so fantastic. Like, how did it come about? Who created it? I'm just so curious about it because I'm extremely fascinated with it.
Yes, there is a perception of beings in your world to such mind-altering apparent substances, but in reality, that's a normal state of being higher dimensionality. It's just that you're more able to control it when you're on such a trip, for example. You get out of control in the sense that your conscious mind is not able to keep track with the experience. This is why you're coming back from it, and sometimes you're not fully able to grasp what it is you just went through, while you, however, were fully able to grasp it while you were in the state, because originally you didn't have a trip that lasted for a certain time. You were in that dimension that was also, to like degree, beyond time. So therefore you had an understanding that goes beyond time, because you were beyond your current time understanding. Now, this is the best way you can phrase this verbally. However, the idea is you're also sending frequency energy to have this more understanding for individuals that are interested in it. However, the main concept we can share verbally also for people to tune into later in what you call time is the idea, right, that those chemicals that are present and introduced to your work through different plant matter, through biological engineering in your more ancient past. Some of them are also brought by visitors to alter the experiment they were conducting. So it's quite old. The modern rediscovery is simply the isolation of the isotope from different plant matters, like much of your chemistry has accomplished. It was mostly the simple idea of extracting animal and plant matter and making it more usable in its isolated fashion in your chemical industry. The same applies, of course, to your so-called medicine. You just call certain things drugs or medicine that ultimately are very similar. It depends more on social conditioning than anything else.
Okay, what did the aliens use it for in the past, the visitors? What did they use it in the experiment, in the human experiment? To evolve us, or what?
To, on the contrary, advance certain beings to a certain level of consciousness for some period that you call a time frame, right? To see what they could induct in the person that stayed and would stay with them when they apparently, again referring to timelines here, come out of it again. To put the individual in a state that's more easily administrable, controllable, impressionable.
Okay, so LSD is a tool of advancement.
It can be used as such. It can put an individual in a certain state where it can be easily altered for better or worse. Depends what exactly is being done to it in the particular process. It's opening up. Alcohol has a similar effect, but to much, much lower degree, and the individual is not near as aware, or even less aware than in a normal state what is going on. In the LSD state, they are more aware, but unable to take those ideas with it once the state is over from your time perception. It's like opening a data bank and a written protection file, right? A file that's protected, that copyright protected, that cannot be altered, and for some period you're changing that. You can alter the file, and afterwards it's being readjusted to be unalterable, uneditable. It can be edited, and then afterwards the edit is frozen. The blueprint can be changed, and after the changing has happened, it's again more, perhaps there's a better metaphor, the idea of an ice block, right, can melt, and once melted, it can be transformed much easier in a different shape, and then once it's freezing again, there will be a new shape until it's melted again, right?
Yes,
It makes the individual more malleable.
yes, I totally understand your analogy. And if you were me, what is the highest potential you would use it for?
Well, it simply opens you up, so therefore it depends greatly which individual is doing what to the individual that's currently in the state. The highest potential, of course, would be to stay in the state, but be with your conscious mind advanced enough to be able to handle the state, but there's a fail-safe mechanism that you cannot stay in the state for longer than you can handle it. Either you would physically die and then therefore be in such a state permanently, or as long as you're just in a state under such an artificially created circumstance, you will return. But that of course also only refers to your time frame interaction, because you could literally get stuck on an LSD trip and constantly be on LSD, right? This would just then happen to your version of you that's then constantly on a time frame understanding that is in such a state. Or unless your conscious mind is catching up with it, you would not be able to handle it properly. At least not somebody like who is permanently in the higher dimensionality and has worked his her way up there, or rather transformed itself to a state where they're able to handle such frequencies.
Okay, I think I'll work my way up there.
Hey
yeah,
Richard, I'm gonna go. Yeah, I was just gonna let you know that your time was up.
All right, KALASK, strength and honor. Thank you.
Strength and understanding to Richard.
Hello again, KALASK. Thanks again. I just want to reiterate my gratitude for how you guys have helped me when it comes to setting boundaries. It really has transformed my life, because for so long I feel like I just got walked over by everyone, but now I feel not necessarily fearless, but a lot more empowered. So I just want to share my gratitude for that. And then for my question, just if you could just briefly provide a message from Swank, that'd be great. And I want to leave enough time as possible for everyone else, so you can just say something brief if you can connect to their energy.
Well, first and foremost, also appreciation to Zach from the whole idea. It's something we agree with both them and us and other members of the Empire, even things like Merkel or Voltax, to create beneficiality or whatever of darkness in this context, right? The idea, again, before we come into the idea of communicating time frame reality-wise with something like to a session or direction such a matter, we converse also with other beings and something, especially like general topics that are being conveyed, and obviously it's also something we are in alignment with them on this particular topic. Again, there's the great benefit. When in your spiritual faggotry community consider it to be a great achievement to get spiritually fucked in the ass, so to speak. We obviously don't. Now, the value of darkness is not self-destruction or pure horror, like my some perceive it in the mortal case, that are benefiting themselves greatly by destroying everything but also hampering themselves. We consider ourselves to be more balanced in the state, or obviously still much more to the darker degree of the spectrum, like some perhaps similar to us, more or less, also with the Vortex group. Now, frequency-wise, we're on a similar page, otherwise we wouldn't be conversing in such a manner. And obviously there's also a link up with you in particular in this case, so it's not just us who gave you the general teaching, but we very much appreciate the sentiment, or there's also the guiding along in certain situations when you would be in a space where you could be walked over, so to speak, right? Where there is emotional or spiritual or whatever you want to call it backup happening from this grouping to your particular identity that you reached out to. but obviously only because you are open to such a perception. Obviously, you can call that in you're in a situation where you're in one way or the other conflict with another individual. It is always advisable. Ultimately, of course, you need to come up with the right balance for yourself. Again, we don't advise people to be completely in the middle point between light and dark either, but to use both extremes however you see it fitting. And when it comes to the ability to set boundaries, perhaps a little different expression, wording, but that's also a version of conflict, strife, and an embracing of struggle, right? That's necessary to help set healthy boundaries. If you refuse darkness, struggle, and conflict, you can't have a boundary.
Right, absolutely. And so the message from Swamp, you're just saying that they're assisting me in the same regards, just as far as setting boundaries.
Not just a message that they are doing that, but also an invitation for you to call upon their energy if you wish in certain situations.
Okay, awesome.
Obviously, you can do the same with us, but yes.
Great. All right, thank you, KALASK. Strength and honor.
Strength or stress.
Does Malik or anybody else have questions for KALASK today? All right. If not, real quick before I ask you to connect us to Metax, KALASK, does marijuana also shift you to another dimension?
Well, it opens you up similarly, perhaps to your idea to be more original in the plant matter. Perhaps, well, very oversimplifying, somewhere between the alcohol idea and the LSD or ayahuasca idea, perhaps, or the DMT molecule, right?
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to smoke some marijuana as soon as the session ends, class. Hopefully, if it feels like it helps me to connect to you guys better and like for you guys to receive my transmissions more clearly.
It also has a sedating effect, however.
Does it help you to receive my transmissions, telepathic transmissions, more clearly?
The other way around. It helps you receive.
Okay. Okay. If you want to experience marijuana, you're welcome to connect them to my frequency or whatever after this session. But
yes.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, and same for Metax too. Metax, you're welcome to connect with me. Anyway, yeah, class, can you connect to Metax now, please?
If there are further inquiries to our species, do you put some water in the vessel? Yes, we'll bring in the kitty cats.
All right, thanks.
Well. Much strength or light dark to the entire collective Hairless Monkeys.
All right, much appreciation from the Hairless Monkey Collective class. Talk to you next month. Thanks.
Task! sense. Can you understand my wording, or do I closer to the mic?
Hey, Metax, I can hear you. Yeah, you're a little bit low, so yeah, maybe you can lean a little bit closer to the microphone, or simply speak up a little bit.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, that's a lot better. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, hello, Metax, welcome. Yeah, Tran is first. So Tran, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Hi, Metax.
Greetings, Tran.
It's great to be talking to you again.
Mm-hmm.
A
As the
lot of-
reptiles have explained, we are not necessarily again talking, but I appreciate the sentiment.
Yes, yes. A lot of changes have happened for me since the last call. I've had some big changes in terms of major beings in my life. So the little cat that I have recently added to my family, she is no longer with me now, and it was very upsetting that this happened. I have been reflecting a lot about why this has happened, and there are many things that there are many suggestions that my friends have come up with and that I have come up with, but ultimately I think it comes down to a reminder to be more self-loving to my younger aspects. But this has been quite a blow. I was wondering if you had any words for me, and also any information about how she's doing now.
First and foremost, I can appreciate and agree with your sentiment of your interpretation of the meaning. It can have many meanings, but there's definitely one that I approve of. I'm also aware of David from a similar situation in his younger years and the stress that it can be causing. However, from our perception out here, everything happens for a reason, and transitioning in such a manner is certainly a part of life. And as reptiles have also shared earlier, it's part of the struggle and conflict, it's part of existence just as much. And obviously, the individual is doing quite well. Most on the other side, so to speak, are doing quite well. First and foremost, I would greatly encourage you to open up your heart again, which is close to a certain degree since the experience that you have described. And it's quite possible for you to connect to an individual telepathically or attract another individual at similar frequency. I'm not suggesting to physically replace the individual at all. Whatever you're doing, you first need to open your heart in order to be at the right frequency for any such a positive event as possible, and also being accepting of whatever it is that is happening. And I've had quite a few interactions with David over the course of this year, particularly in terms of self-judgment considering such events, but ultimately beings make decisions to come in and out. It is much more an emotional lesson than there is intellectual understanding. It's not so much you need to understand exactly why this individual has passed from your life in the manner. It's more an emotional understanding in terms of connecting two aspects of yourself that are in grief. See it as an opportunity, perhaps, but again, I don't want to make light or intellectualize this concept. There's nothing wrong with feeling the pain, but be loving to the aspects of yourself that are in pain. I suppose the best way I can phrase it. Allow the pain to come up over the loss, and be loving towards the aspects that apparently of yourself are lost, because it's not so much the creature
the feline nature that you're mourning, but more an aspect of yourself that is connected to the creature that you are feeling a loss of, which is an illusion, is still there. An aspect of yourself that you've split off. I'm of course aware of the concept you have termed inner child from your psychological angle, but of course it's a psychological concept. It's of course something that your psychology has termed such to make your conscious mind have an easy understanding. I don't necessarily approve of your psychology in such a manner because it oversimplifies things to a great degree and yet makes it more complicated in other regards where I think it is unnecessary. So I wouldn't necessarily refer to it with any particular name, a younger self or something like it. Just get into the state of the current grief that you're feeling and embrace your own grief with love. There's not much need to have more understanding of the details of such. And if there is a learning lesson to be learned, it will come up during the process. And if there are possibility to connect to the entity, that is also something that can follow up once you're through the grieving process, not just referring to you particular individual, but everybody who is going through such an experience in general. And once you're more self-loving, that will come almost automatically. That doesn't mean that the entity has to be gone forever.
I must have so many aspects of myself that are in grief right now, because that's only, one of the relationships that I've lost this month. I've lost another major one as well, and so I'm just thinking that there's just so much loss. There must be so much grief that I need to be at peace with, that I've just been suppressing or something.
It's not just you, many people at the current time frame in reality are going through similar processes. And again, the attempt to understand intellectually is perhaps futile, at least from your current incarnated egoic perspective. So just allowing the grief to come up, which of course can manifest itself to different experiences individually, also one experience or different aspects can experience themselves in one event, vice versa. It's not necessarily one event being symbolic of one particular aspect of yourself. You don't need to differentiate yourself those aspects either. It is the same as if you're having a bad day and you knock your foot on the kitchen table and then you're in more negative energy and you burn yourself in the shower, you walk out the door, you run into somebody and then you crash your car, and it just keeps going like that. So mostly I would say as an invitation to open up your heart and embrace those aspects of yourself, and then you will hold the process of necessity to being an apparent downward spiral.
Okay. I have been feeling a call to get out of my head and get back into my body and in my heart. So,
Particularly the heart. I don't sense you as ungrounded. I sense you mostly as being emotionally locked up.
Yeah, okay.
It's also in your speed patterns. Your throat is also affected, so it's also likely a byproduct of the grief process. So it's perhaps good that you're speaking about it.
Yeah, I don't speak about it to anyone.
Well, you are now.
Okay, I will.
I would first encourage you to open up the heart further before you go anywhere else, Justice. Allow yourself to be overwhelmed with whatever is currently coming up in the process. Also, don't hesitate to express your pain if you feel any. Let your fears needed to be expressed. Don't hold it back.
You know, Metax, if everybody expressed their pain all the time, none of us would ever get anything done.
What exactly would need to be done? Allow your pain to flow out. If everybody would be expressing their pain more frequently, it would be much more easy for you to relate to each other.
Yeah, point taken. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will do that. I'll stay in my heart.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Much love to you.
Much love to you, not just from me, but also from the other individual and anybody beyond your current physicality that is currently aware of your loss.
Thank you.
Much love.
Hi, Metax. It's Casper here.
Greetings, Casper.
I was wondering if my oversoul has any incarnation as a female feline that you can see.
Oh, incarnation works a little bit different than what you might perceive and such, but I understand what you're referring to, and of course there are versions that are connected to your higher self or soul that are linked to certain incarnations, and some of them are feline and some of them are female feline, yes.
It's because I'm wondering if you could put me through to one of them so I could talk to her or him if there's
This one particular individual has proved the easiest. That's also in alignment with the current frequency that was being discussed. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Casper. Who am I talking to?
Let's say Sihal.
What did you call yourself?
Sihal. For our current interaction, Sihal, if you wish. But remember, we all are just using labels in terms on our word as far as we relate to beings in your word.
Yes. Thank you very much for connecting to me. Are you a female or a male?
I am a female of my species.
I thought you sounded female. So what dimension are you in?
I'm currently the 5th dimension, transitioning to the 6th, as far as you refer to dimensionality.
Okay. And do you live on a Sigabar or on a ship or somewhere else?
Currently, I'm located on a ship. I have planetary origin and secret bar, but I'm a traveler.
Okay. Well, if you're ever in the neighborhood of Earth and feel like coming by or inviting me onto the spaceship, you're certainly welcome to do that.
I don't necessarily take people on board of your world, but yes, I can of course pass by through your night sky, for example, or day sky for that matter, and make myself visible, or rather the ship, that is very possible.
Wow, that would be nice. What do you look like?
I'm of a more leopard print. I'm taller than you, or taller than this person, but not by that much. I'm rather slender for
Okay.
my race, but not so much for yours, perhaps. I have a fine-toned, beautiful body with glistening fur. I'm slightly muscular.
Okay.
I have a long tail.
I'm wondering, are all the high developed felines, do they all have faces like lions or tigers or leopards, or are some of you also having faces like cats, like domestic cats we have here on Earth?
Well, I would not call domestic cats, but perhaps also, yes, what you might call such faces of a more such a nature. Those are not necessarily related to us, however, they are distinct, but there's larger family groupings, different race. However, there are those that are perhaps more similar to your wild cat, for example, your so-called Norwegian wild cat. There are some with similar features that would remind you of such. Remember, most species on your world are somewhat distant seedings from those out there. However, some of them have been altered on your world, so they have changed since then. It would not literally look like a human with the head of a cat, but it would strongly remind you of such.
Okay. Um, I'm wondering if you would like to be channeled through me sometime. Like talking to me directly without the use of a David vessel. Would that be possible? And would you be interested in that?
It's easy to start with writing, but I would certainly be interested if you're able to take it to such a degree, yes.
Okay. And is there anything you would need me to do, or would suggest me to do to be better able to do that?
Be more integrative of your own current incarnation.
And what does that mean?
I'm being more grounded. You seem to be alright currently, but when you are getting excited about such an idea, you get slightly ungrounded because you lose the touch with your current physical life, and you need to have it in order to do what I'm currently doing through this person. Especially if you want to bring something through, in order to bring it through to your physical world, you need to be in your physical world. That should be understandable, I hope.
Yes, yes. Um, and I'm wondering, would you also be able to help me to manifest like better health and happiness and connectedness to other people?
Certainly, but it also requires you to open your heart further.
Okay. Um, can you read what my pre-birth intention for this current human incarnation is?
You'll be something like a healer. It does not mean you have a certain laid out blueprint you need to follow word by word, but more the idea that was something from what I perceive right now, from what you are referring to as pre-incarnation, that you set yourself out to do, but this can of course happen in numerous different fashions. What most in your words set out before they do what you call incarnation. They represent a certain energy and a certain concept more so than a particular profession or a dating style or a living style and other things you use to identify yourself with after the fact, so to speak.
Okay. And is there anything you see like is the subject or I think yes the subject for my when you say personal development, if so to speak, what my personal lesson is?
To be compassionate.
Okay. And would you like to share with me what your pre-birth intention for your current life is?
Yes. I guess I said I'm a traveler, but I'm also something like a fighter, perhaps. I provide a backup to certain groups as we are still somewhat more on a physical identity than the being that of a similar frequency with different dimensional connectivity that Metax persons brought me through. So I'm perhaps something like a fighter, but not necessarily in the sense that I engage to hand-to-hand combat by transport troops and other groupings for colonization project. And I see something like perhaps a Valkyrie is that a term I'm finding in this person's mind for something. Female fighter, but again, it's not so much about direct combat, more about colonization that I'm excited about.
Okay. You said that it was the colonization you were mostly interested about. Is that right? Correct?
Yes, furthering something like an settlement, spreading of our culture, also perhaps widening a feline margin, and I bring people there, colonists, and also secure their presence to make sure there's no interference. And if there is, that needs to be fought off.
Okay. How old are you? If you could like say for instance in percentage of your lifespan. I know time works different.
Yes, I'm perhaps in my 20s as far as your Earth lifetime would be concerned in similar fashion. Obviously, I'm older than that, but I'm approximately at that stage of my life.
Okay. Wow,
Late
you
20s.
yeah, okay. Um do you recall being me in my current incarnation?
Well, I recall or I'm aware of the decision to incarnate of an aspect you call oversoul in the world that you are currently in. But I am you as much as I am all other aspects, and therefore they are connected to your oversoul, and therefore it is not like I remember something from the past that was decided upon. I am able to connect to a decision that led to the incarnation of myself as well as yourself and others.
Okay, and so do you I mean do you have access to like everything I have experienced as well as what you have experienced in your current life, or was that not like open to you?
Only the aspects that are relevant to me right now. Everything else is likely confusing, just like vice versa.
Okay. Wow. Wow. I think my time is up, but it was really wonderful to speak to you, and I know that one of the others would also like to speak to you, so I would let her come through, and
Oh,
just say thank you so much for speaking to me, and I look very much forward to hopefully channeling you or speaking to you directly. Much love.
much love and collaboration. Bye for now.
Bye.
Much love. Thank
Yes, you're very welcome. Glad to
I
be
would
here.
I would like to ask you on the topic of Reiki and energy healing. And I'd like to ask you about methods for clearing my energy before and after practicing, especially in a public setting or with those that I don't want to create cords with. What best practices could you recommend for me?
Well, important is that you first have a well-opened third eye so the energy can flow freely and you don't feel like you're running out of energy. Then once, be sure that you protect your sacral. So as you're aware, you need to first heal yourself before you can heal others, or in the process, and therefore there's also something in your sacral you might want to address and be more comfortable with your sexuality and your physical identity. More your sexuality than your identity, really. And once you're in that state, you will have an easier time deciding who you want to connect with. And remember, just talking about a sexual connection, but your sacral is not just connected to your pure sexuality, but also your playful nature and the enjoyment of the physical life. And if you believe it or not, enjoyment of physical life is an essential part of healing, especially if you want to heal something physical. Because when you have the appreciation, everything automatically heals itself. It's only when you create a blockage there that it becomes impossible to heal something. In reality, Reiki just opens you up to let it your own form heal itself. So it's not so much that you need to heal others, it's more that you heal, you take